Welcome to Spectrum Perspectives, real talk with parents, professionals, and autism advocates, with your host, Cindy Gellermini.
In today's episode, you're going to meet Shannon, and she'll talk about her son, Jordan, who's 25 years old. Shannon originally lived in Florida, where she raised her two children as a single mom. She's now in Georgia, and she's going to tell us what it was like raising her autistic son in the state of Florida and what they're doing now. Shannon now has a business and a podcast called Not Your Average Autism Mom. She works with and helps other moms that have kids with autism. You're going to enjoy this interview. Stay tuned. Hi, everybody. This is Cindy with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives. And I have a new guest today who is also a podcaster as well. And she focuses on autism. Hello, Shannon. How are you?
Hi, Cindy.
Tell me, Shannon, you have how many children?
I have two children.
Okay.
I have a 25-year-old son whose name is Jordan, who was diagnosed with autism when he was 5 years old. And he will always live with me. So he is not independent. He will always live with us and need care. And then I also have a daughter who is going to be turning 23, who just graduated college. She went through a fifth year because of COVID.
Yay,
So,
COVID.
right, exactly.
So I'm going to just ask you the same questions I ask every mom, because everybody has a different perspective and everybody's story is completely different. And I just find it really interesting. You know, you can't just lump autism all into one, group, because everybody's
Absolutely.
child is different. The moms are all different. Everybody has a different journey. So let's go all the way back to when you were pregnant with Jordan. Were there any red flags? Or there any warning signs that something may not be right with the pregnancy or anything like that?
None. I actually had a miscarriage probably 2 years before Jordan, 2 to 3 years before I was pregnant with Jordan. So he was my first child. Pregnancy was all normal. Everything was fine. There was no problems during the pregnancy at all. When we went to the hospital, we actually lived in Southern California at the time. And I had a very old school doctor. You know, had been delivering babies for years. I'm sure he retired shortly after our delivery. But Jordan was born after 12 hours of labor and via forceps. So he was delivered via forceps. And when he first came out, they kind of code redded him and had to take him for lots of testing and everything, but everything came back fine. All of his, I think it's
APGAR scores. Yeah, they were all
okay. So all those scores came back normal and everything. And so fine delivery. I think looking back where I am now and everything that I've learned and the journey that we've been on, I wonder if the forceps delivery had anything to do with it, because he still to this day has like a mark on the side of his head, and he had the is it the fontanelle, the
Yes.
soft spot in the front of his head was open for a significantly longer period of time.
Yeah. Robbie also, my husband said he looked like Rocky after he was delivered because of all the bruises all on his face and everything from, I think he was forceps as well. So I have four kids. It's hard to remember.
Right. Right.
But I do. The one thing that I remember was I was in labor for a long time, and my husband remembered it, that the doctor, there were a lot of deliveries that day. It was the day after Christmas. And the doctor came back in and she says, "Why is she still here? She should have delivered this baby hours ago."
Oh.
And yeah, now I'm remembering. And then they put oxygen on me and they flipped me over on all fours. They kept doing that because he kept going into distress, So why were we hanging around for so long? So
right.
I'm like you.
Waiting?
You look back and you're like, you wonder, but
yeah, no. And kind of the same thing in a different scenario, but when I was, 12 hours in labor with Jordan, they the nursing staff had already had everything ready to do a C-section
Mhm.
because it just wasn't progressing. And that's why I mentioned earlier about having an old school doctor. He was like, no, we're getting this baby out. Like, we're not going to do C-section.
Yeah, they didn't believe in C-sections. No.
Exactly. And so, who knows? I mean, it wasn't ever something that I, worried about. Cindy, I'm that mom that it was like the minute that I knew that Jordan had autism, why he had autism never mattered to me.
Mhm.
Like, I was just never that mom that focused on that,
Right.
because I felt like if I'm focusing on that, I'm not going to be learning all the things that I need to learn about this journey that I'm going on.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You know?
We have family members that have a child, much older, that they said something happened during the delivery and they sued the doctor, and I'm like, I just can't go there because I can't, I can't look for somebody to blame. It is what it is. I can't
Sure.
change the past. And, I'm more focused on moving forward, not looking back. But,
Absolutely.
we're in the same boat. We kind of look back and we wonder, but
Yeah, it just
it's not
makes
the
you go,
focus. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. It's not the focus. Okay. So how about his development? Was he on target? Was he delayed?
Oh no, he was way delayed.
Mhm.
So he was a very content baby. Like, he never cried, but he never slept.
Yeah.
He literally never slept until his teenage years, when we got medication controlled to help him sleep.
Yeah.
He would never stay. He would go to sleep fine, but he would never stay asleep longer than 3 hours,
Right.
like towards the end. But in the beginning, an hour and a half, like that was it. And he would get up and be up for an hour and a half, go
Right.
back to sleep,
Right.
and so
And
he
what did
did
he
that.
do when he got up? Because I went through the same thing. That's why I'm curious.
Oh, well, I mean, he would get up when he was little, he'd get up and just play in his room. And then as he got older, he had video stuff. He
Yeah.
had video stuff in his room until, and we'll probably get to that, but years later, and I made some serious changes, and it made serious changes in our household.
Mm.
But he did not crawl until he was a year old. He did not walk until he was over 18 months.
We're on the same.
And
Robbie was exactly the same.
and you know what, Cindy, he was big. I mean, he wasn't a big kid when he was born. I mean, when he was born, he was 7'6". So he wasn't real
God,
big.
so was Robbie. That's crazy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was 7'6", and he had a really big head. Like,
Mhm.
his head was really big. And so everything was delayed. But I think when I knew something was wrong, was we took him to the pediatrician for a 6-month checkup. And he was born in June. So we were getting ready to travel. We were in Southern California, and we were getting ready to travel back to Florida to see family for Christmas. And we went to the doctor for his checkup, and she said, "Have you been sleeping?" And I said, "Well, he doesn't, he's never been a good sleeper." And she's like, she said, his ears are both so infected that if I had this ear infection as an adult, I would not be able to stand up.
Wow.
And so she went and immediately called the ENT, and she said, of course you can't go to Florida. Like, he can't fly. And so she called the ENT. We went straight to the ENT's office, and I think he went in surgery to get tubes in his ears like that night or the next morning.
Right. Right. And he was
And
only 6 months old.
6 months. And
Yeah.
we had no idea. Like, he wasn't crying. He wasn't
Right.
pulling on his ears, like nothing. And I don't know if you remember, but he had one of those, I don't even know if they have them anymore, but you clip them inside your door frame and they can bounce.
Yes. We had, yep.
A Johnny
Oh yeah, they
jumper.
loved it. Yes, he loved to jump. He loved it. Yeah, we had that.
Jordan loved to jump. Like,
Uh-huh.
that was literally all he wanted to do was jump.
Yes.
And so, there you go. It was that sensory seeking,
Sure.
right from the beginning, now that I look back.
Yeah. And Robbie always had chronic ear infections as well.
Yeah.
He had laryngitis when he was 6 months old. Like, what baby gets laryngitis?
Wow.
He lost his voice. Yeah, and he got asthmatic bronchitis, but the ear infections were a big thing, and he got tubes when he was 2.
Yeah, Jordan had tubes 2 or 3 times, I think, something like that.
Mhm.
But this is what's funny. So he had tubes early on, and literally Jordan does not get sick,
Mhm.
like ever. Like, and I don't know if it's, I mean, he's just never been, he never gets sick. And I mean, I need to knock on wood, but I said this during COVID. I was like, he was exposed 3 times during COVID
Mhm.
in a car with somebody who tested positive
Right.
and never tested positive. He's just never sick. I remember when we left Florida to move to Georgia, he was 20. So it was 5 years ago. And I went to get both my kids records, and she said, well, Jordan's record has been closed for years because he just has never been there because he was never sick. This was just the normal pediatrician.
Right.
This wasn't his doctor that was giving him medicine.
Right.
So obviously that doctor we saw on a regular basis.
Right.
But even now, since we've been here, like, he's never been to the doctor for being sick.
Right. Right.
So just has a really good immune system since those early days.
Right.
He had the ear infections. So I knew at that point his pain tolerance was super high, as
Yes.
I mean, he just never would react to anything, and still to this day,
Yes.
has a super high pain tolerance. Will watch loves to watch them take blood when he goes to the
Yes.
doctor.
Yeah, I'm passing out, and
Oh, me too.
Great. Yeah. Yeah.
Same.
And
Like,
we would have the at the pediatrician, they bring in like extra staff to hold him down, expecting him to, have a fit. And he'd just sit there and watch it like, oh yeah, that's cool.
That's cool, right? Exactly. Jordan, same thing. And I'll say when they come in, listen, he's fine, but I'm gonna look away.
Yeah, exactly. Mom's gonna pass out, but he's fine.
He's gonna be good, but not me. So
Yeah.
So yeah, and then when we had
Robbie he'd bite his cuticles, and they would get infected, and his whole fingers would get all swollen, and like I would be screaming in pain, and I wouldn't even know. Like I would have to inspect him for that.
Yeah.
To see if we needed to go to the doctor. I had to check,
on the regular
same thing, very high pain tolerance. Yeah. And then we found out later that Robbie had neuropathy in his hands and feet. So that
really?
was, yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Huh. So anyway, I'm sorry, I cut you off. You were going to say
something.
Something.
Interesting. No worries. So then when we had my daughter, Jordan was 2, and he just had very little interest. Like was not upset, but just had no interest, in the baby at all.
Right.
And so I kind of watched that dynamic. Well, by this point, as he's turning 3, I'm like reading every book I can find because there wasn't the internet. There wasn't all this stuff. Cause I mean, that was in, 98, 99.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up reading a book called Eating an Artichoke by Echo Flynn. And I honestly felt like I was reading the story of my life. And it was about her son, and she had a daughter as well. And, just kind of the whole situation. And I thought, I don't care what anyone says. This is what Jordan has. And her son actually had Asperger's, back then.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But there were just so many things that were in the book that were things that Jordan was doing. And so I self-diagnosed him before we ever really got the official diagnosis.
Right. So let's back up a little bit. So he had the tubes in his ears. So for us, Robbie, he had said a couple of words, and then right around when he was 2 years old, they were gone. But we didn't see, there was no date that I can pinpoint it to, because he only said something if he was stressed. Like if I dropped him off in the nursery and went to go work out, and normally a baby cries for his mom, and he would say mama or bye-bye, or he wanted his baba, right? And it was only if he was upset. So he normally was not really ever upset.
Right.
So it was a couple months that had gone by. I'm like, I don't think I've heard him say anything in quite a while. So I mentioned it to a friend that was a speech therapist, and she's the one that said, you need to get him evaluated now. So my question to you, since you mentioned the ear infections, was he speaking? Because we attributed it to the ear infections. We thought he was hard of hearing. It was a hearing problem. Autism never even entered my radar because, as you say, there's no internet. There was no way to
Right.
research anything. If
No,
I were to Google
nothing.
it now, autism would pop up right away. But back
Everywhere.
then, nobody had autism back then.
Nope.
Robbie was born in 1989. It was 1 in 10,000.
Yeah.
Nobody had autism back then. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, how did you even find this book? Like, what were you even looking for? Like, what was going on that was making you start researching, like, something's not right? Was it the delays?
Yes, it was definitely the delays and
And what was your
his
pediatrician saying at the time?
oh, nothing. Oh no, he's just a boy. Every boy develops differently. That was the
Mhm.
whole thing. And I just knew, like, I had been around so many of my friends who had already had kids because I was a little later than they were. And so I had been around their kids and I knew how engaging they were. And I knew,
Okay, there you
um,
go. Yeah, because sometimes first time moms don't pick up, but if you were
exactly.
around other kids, so
That was my key. Was I
yes.
was around my friends that had kids and had spent time with them, and so I knew, like, he's not engaging. Like, he had echolalia. That was how he communicated. So he would say
Can you
words.
explain to people listening that don't know what echolalia is?
Echolalia. So he would repeat words and phrases that he heard or saw, and he would do that even in not in the appropriate context.
Mhm.
So
Can
the
you give me a
context
for
that he's
instance?
using it. So I mean, he learned stop sign, and he would, every stop sign he would, say stop sign. um but everything, so like if you'd say, do you want milk, and he'd say, do you want milk?
Right.
So instead of saying, yes, I want milk, he would just say, do you want milk?
Right.
Or so that's what they do, is they just repeat what they hear. So they are learning words, but they're not learning conversation and using them in the right context. So that was a big thing. And he was at a daycare, a church daycare, and they are the ones that said to us, listen, I'm just going to recommend that you get him evaluated because he does not engage with the other children at all. Every time I would go to pick him up, he would be off by himself in the corner. Yeah, he wasn't engaging with anyone. And it was, even with me and his dad, he wasn't engaging.
Mhm. Yeah, that's in my children's book. That's the first chapter. Is the little penguin is at daycare, and she's the first one that sees it. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
really?
He doesn't sit for circle time. He gets up and runs
Right.
away. He doesn't engage with the other kids. She says, Robbie, he likes to rock in the rocking chair. He lines up all the cars and trucks instead of playing with them like they're an actual truck.
Yeah, there was
You know,
no imaginative play at all.
yeah,
At all. And then I think, when my daughter was 10 months old and was like running, and I was like,
right.
wow, like, that really was a big thing for me. So,
Mhm.
we got him evaluated, and he was diagnosed back then, he was diagnosed PDD NOS. So
Correct.
pervasive developmental delay,
Mhm.
not otherwise specified.
Correct. Same with
And
Robbie.
yeah, and we started going to we saw a neuropsychologist. He was a neuropsychologist in Central Florida. Super amazing. But I just don't know. They didn't know then what they know now. Like, I really feel like if I would have had the opportunity to have given Jordan the therapies that are available today, I think he would have been totally different.
Mm. Yeah,
And
so what did the doctor suggest that you do after the
I
diagnosis?
mean, I don't, they would just, like, we would literally go in there, and it was like a family thing. Like, it was Jordan and me and his dad. And, every time I remember, I remember every time we left, his dad would just be like mad. Like, this is such a waste of time. Like, what are we doing?
Okay, so you continued seeing the doctor then. See, when
did.
the doctor that diagnosed Robbie, he was a developmental pediatrician. He said, this is what he has, PDD, NOS, handed me a pamphlet about autism. And he said, here, go home and read this. And I suggest that you send him to this particular school. And that was it. Never saw him again.
Really?
Yeah. And I walked out of there saying, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Because the only thing I knew of autism was that they were in their own world and all these things that didn't fit Robbie. I'm like, no, he's not in his own world. He knows exactly what's going on. If you come out of the bathroom and don't shut the door, he will run right over there and slam the door. Like, how dare you leave that door open?
Exactly. That's supposed to be shut.
Yes. So it wasn't until I got to the end of that little pamphlet that a mom told her story about her son, and, just like you, that book that you read. And I said, oh my God, she's describing my child. That's when I had the light bulb moment, but he didn't give me any therapy. He didn't tell me what to do. All he did was suggest that he go to a school for autistic kids. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. We saw this doctor on the regular, like 3 times a year, like every 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And it would just, they'd take him in and they'd weigh him and they'd check his vitals. And then he would play a couple games with them across, sitting on the floor or, see if he would stack the blocks or see, but Jordan would not, he didn't play like that.
Right.
Like, he didn't play like that. And he
sounds like he was checking his development, but he wasn't doing anything to.
Right. Or giving us any guidance on what we could do. Like, that was the whole thing, is we really got no guidance on what we could do. And then we put him in a, early steps program in the public school. And it was just a nightmare. Like, he couldn't, the behaviors, just, that was when it all began, really. He would throw himself on the floor. Transitions were terrible. He had no focus. It was just everything was awry. But they kept him in that program. He had some amazing teachers in that program, in that pre-K program. And I'm pretty sure Jordan was like, Jordan started people understanding what autism is in Orange County schools.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What were the other kids like Down syndrome and like a mix of, like, it wasn't all autistic kids in his class?
No, it wasn't.
It was just a one lump.
Yeah, one lump, special education. You all go here, whether you're, learning disability and you struggle with reading, you go here too. It was, everything. And he really, like, my last name, Cindy, is Urquiola. So it is not, first of all, it's not an easy name to forget once you've seen it.
Right.
And so Jordan became very known through, his 14 years in the school program. Like, everyone knew who he was, and his behaviors, like I said, started in pre-K, throwing himself, on the ground, taking his clothes off on the bus. These were just all regular things. I was pretty sure I was on speed dial through all the years with all of his schools.
Yeah. Did the teachers call you from school to tell you about his behaviors?
All the time. All the time. Yeah.
Yeah, because they didn't know what to do.
What can we do? I said, I wish I could tell you.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I thought you were supposed to know.
Right.
I remember saying to them so many times, like, crying my eyes out in an IEP meeting as they're telling me all the stuff that he's doing. It wasn't anything good. And I remember just bawling and saying, I don't know what to do. No one can tell me what to do. No one can help me.
Wow.
I just don't know. And, at that point, my children's dad and I got divorced when they were 5 and 3. So I was a single mom for all those years. Yeah. And I was a single mom working 2 jobs, trying to get them taken care of. Meanwhile, Jordan was not handling, daycare well. thankfully, you know what? We were very lucky in the early years, Cindy, that the people in daycare were so understanding of, just my situation, but got to know Jordan at an early age.
Mhm.
And so I was lucky because he ended up staying there, until they were at a point where they could stay home alone. They would go there after school.
Oh, so after school they would go to the daycare
Yeah,
because
they
you were
would go there
working.
for
Got it.
years. And,
Yeah.
so I was really lucky in that aspect because
Mhm.
Jordan had a lot of behaviors there and they never, like, them making us leave, I didn't feel like was ever an option. So we were
Yeah.
really lucky there.
Oh, okay. So how long did he stay at that daycare till?
Well, until they could stay home alone, I think.
Mhm.
So it was, I mean, I would say it was
10?
probably a little older than that. I
Yeah.
would say, well, and I'm thinking, thinking back, actually, I think their grandmother stayed with them, and then my best friend stayed with them after school. So I think he was probably there through elementary school
Mhm.
before he transitioned,
Right. Okay.
I think.
So in school, so did they ever do ABA therapy with him?
No.
Mm.
See, none of that was just never like something that's anyone talked to us about ever.
Were there any schools around you that were specifically for autistic kids or no?
No,
I guess not.
none,
Yeah, it's
none.
interesting because when I did my video blog, people would write to me, from all over the place.
Right.
And Florida was one of the places where people would tell me there's nothing for my child. Like moms
Nothing.
that just couldn't even send their kid to school, period, because there was nothing for them. Because
Yeah.
of the behaviors and stuff, they wouldn't let them come to
Mhm.
school, and they didn't have schools for autistic kids. They just homeschooled their kid. I don't think they even homeschooled them. They just kept them home doing nothing
Right.
all
Because there
day.
was
I mean, it's awful.
nothing,
I was really
nothing.
surprised.
Yeah. Well, they when Jordan started, I remember they just they wanted him to start in a regular kindergarten class.
Mhm.
And I was like, I told them from the beginning,
Good luck with that.
you're right, exactly. Like it's never gonna work. And like literally it was like, a week. And they said, no, he needs to go in this special education classroom,
Hmm.
because that's what it was. And it was
Sure.
all different kinds of kids. And Jordan has always and still always did really well with a male teacher, a
Hmm.
male figure. Because Jordan had extreme mean behaviors for all these years. But with a man, he would never do that.
Right, because they feared them a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Robbie was the same.
And
Yeah.
I would say if you could just
He
give him
could
a
get
male
away with
teacher,
stuff with women. Yeah. And he knew the women were a little afraid. Like if
yep,
he kind of act like he was going to come and pull their hair or something, they'd freak out and run away, but men wouldn't do that.
yep,
And he would
yep.
behave for men.
That Jordan, same. Cindy, that's so funny. Yeah, we had an amazing teacher that was Jordan's teacher, I think third and fourth grade. I was super lucky that, he had him during that time, but it was so funny because every time Adam would leave the classroom, the aide would end up having to call in all the staff because Jordan would he would know he could push her buttons
Right.
and he would totally do it. He would totally do it.
Yeah. Now
No.
he's verbal.
He is verbal, yes. He talks at you. So, he's not a conversationalist.
Right.
He'll ask questions about things that he's interested in. But really, that's probably one of the biggest things that we still work on nonstop is just getting him to try to engage with other people. Like he's very happy if he could just talk to me and only me about what he wants to talk about.
Hmm.
That would be fine for him.
Right.
So getting him to talk to other people is just not easy. And you can't give him the option to say no to things because
Okay.
his answer to everything will be no.
Right.
No, no, thank you. You
Hmm.
know, the only thing he wants to do is go to the library
Hmm.
and get books because he is an avid reader.
Okay. That was
Um,
my other question. Yeah.
yeah, he's an
Mhm.
avid reader. He's only an avid reader because we have electronic free days
Ah,
that we started, years. Really, we started all of this like only 5 or 6 years ago is when we really started making some drastic changes, because when my daughter Madison graduated high school in 2016, she was going away to college, and
Mhm.
we had decided we were going to move to Georgia. And so we moved to North Georgia. My fiance and I moved in together.
Mhm.
And we had been together 10 years in Florida,
Mhm.
but we never lived together.
Mhm.
I was very, I was very adamant about the fact that, I was a single mom raising my kids, and because of my values,
Mhm.
I didn't want them to see anyone waking up in the house in the morning.
Mhm.
And so we dated for a long time. And so when that time came, I said, look, I want to move to the North Georgia mountains,
Mhm.
and I would love it if you would come with me, but you're going to have to retire because, there wasn't the place that he worked wasn't up here.
Mhm.
So when we moved here, what I was getting to was we were living here, and Jordan was having some really negative behaviors.
Mhm.
He calls people very mean names. He's never been physical, which is super important to me.
Yeah.
Now, he has had some aggressive issues to where, like, if I would try to take something away from him,
Mhm.
he would pull it back in an aggressive manner, but never ever would he think about hitting me or anything like that.
Right.
So I'm very thankful for that, because I know a lot of parents
Yeah.
have those problems.
Yeah.
And so I don't have those. But we were just having a lot of negative behaviors, and he was being very resistant to things in the house on a regular basis. And so
Do you think
about
that he was having a problem with the transition of moving to a new home? Do you think that that was a problem?
No, I
Okay.
really don't, because it was just, this wasn't anything new. Okay. He'd had these behaviors for a long time.
Mhm.
But as he got older, because I mean, when he was in middle school, Cindy, I mean, we had to put him in a behavioral health center for 30 days.
Sure, because
Um,
puberty.
yeah, to try to get
Soon as
his
puberty
behavior.
hits, man, wow, they become beasts.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
crazy, and he was just doing things. I had to, Fort Knox my house,
Yeah.
because he would get up in the middle of the night and go outside and go
Would
to.
he elope? Yeah.
He was an eloper, and
Yeah.
he is a food seeker.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
One of my other interviews with someone, her son took off and they found him at the pizzeria. Yeah.
yeah, he is a food seeker. We have
Yes.
still to this day, our refrigerator and pantry are locked
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had other,
So,
I know of other families
he's
that have had to do
constantly
the same.
seeking food. But so what happened was we actually were introduced to the fact that, Shannon, it might be a good idea if he goes into a host home, because he was so dependent on me, which was
Mhm.
totally my fault. I mean, I literally I did it with both my kids. I just did everything for them. It
Mhm.
was just easier for me to just do everything for them,
Mhm.
and which didn't do them any good, either one of them.
Mhm.
But again, I'm not going to beat myself up for it. That's just what I did.
Right.
So we actually interviewed a host home family,
I've never heard of
and
that. I never heard of a host home. I don't know what.
well, so here in Georgia, Jordan goes to a day program,
Mhm.
where he goes from 8:30 to 2 in the afternoon. And some of those, and it's all adults with disabilities, all
Mhm.
different disabilities. And there are people there that are in a host home, which is they're paid to have these adults live in their house with them. They basically become kind of part of their family, but they still get to, like, I can be as involved as I want.
Okay.
So he can come with me on the weekends. I coordinate with the host home family.
It's sort of like not living in a group home, but sort of a halfway there, sort of
It
like
is
experience living with other people in a
exactly
home.
living
And
with
then how
other
long does he
people.
do it for?
Well, they can do it forever.
Oh,
So it's not a temporary thing. They can do it forever. They can transition from there to a group home if they wanted, depending on their level of functioning. But
right. And
we
then
had
these families get paid to do it.
yes,
Okay.
yes. And so
Because why else would you?
exactly. Why else would you?
I mean, especially, I mean, Jordan must not do this, but I've talked to other parents that there's a problem with property destruction, and Robbie used to do that. He used to just destroy my house, so I wouldn't send him to somebody else's home because he would destroy it.
Yeah, and
They would send him back after 2 days.
and there were a lot of, different issues with me with sending Jordan to someone else, because, but again, the reason we were even considering it because we thought that there was a possibility that without me being there for him to be so dependent,
Right, he might become more
independent.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So
And I will say, when I put Robbie in a group home, he all of a sudden just got up and went to the bathroom by himself. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
You've been holding out on me for 20 years?
Yeah.
Like I always had to make him go and tell him, okay, let's go, like on a schedule.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he just got up and went by himself. I said, you gotta be kidding me. So yeah. Yeah. So it's that kind of thing that can happen.
So it's that kind of thing. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like I said, to no fault of theirs, I did it to both my children. But anyways, when we interviewed this,
Are you Italian?
I'm not, but
Yes,
I just have that, and I think it goes back to, I did not have a good childhood, a good family, a good mom figure.
Right.
And I think that, that along with figuring out Jordan has autism at a really young age, like
Sure.
I was all in, and
plus you were a single mom too. Even moms that don't have kids with disabilities, they feel they have to be the mother and the father. They have to sort of
and I think that, their father and I got divorced because I was so all in on figuring out and helping Jordan. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And which happens. I mean, we know that's a big part of it. So I definitely take the blame in that part of it because I was all into how he was going to be better. So when we interviewed the host home family, it was Dave and I, and we went and interviewed them, and we left. And as soon as we got in the car and I shut my door, he looked at me and said, "We will never do that. He will live with us forever. We're going to go home and we're going to sit down and we're going to make some changes to make this all work."
Got it.
And that's when we made a lot of changes. We came home and there was no more electronics. He was an electronic free bedroom. And we had only certain days of the week and times of the day that he could earn electronics based on getting things done and having good behaviors and not getting calls from the center about things that he was doing there. And that's when our world really changed.
And he understood that and he didn't freak out about it?
He did freak out about it.
Oh, okay.
No, it was
it's not easy. Yeah, I can imagine.
It was not easy. It was, and I had talked to his doctor here about it, and he said, listen, you have to go through the hard to get to the easy. And you can choose to do that now, or you can wait, and it's just going to get harder the further along you go, which is ultimately what led me to do what I do today, because I want to encourage these moms to make these changes earlier, because ours was not an easy journey. It was he was in his early 20s. I mean, he was 21, 22.
Yeah. So tell me how you did this. Tell me how you told him that this is what's going to happen. This is going to be on a schedule and all that.
So we've learned that with Jordan, when we tell him something, as long as we give him notice, like you can't do anything right now. You have to, like, listen, next Monday, we're going to take the television out of your room.
Got it.
Because, and I found what works for him is when I blame the doctor or the dentist or whoever, somebody other than us.
Right.
The doctor has said that this is impacting your sleep and we need to get you to sleep better, and
right.
So, but
and then does he keep asking you repeatedly until Monday
repeatedly comes? Over and over and over.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Repeatedly, hundreds of times. And, he hated us. I mean, we were terrible, horrible names,
Does he swear at you? Does he use bad language?
Oh yeah. He uses bad language.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he does that like in his room under his breath. And then when you
Okay.
can't argue with him because he'll say, I didn't say anything.
And does he threaten violence? Does he say
No.
like, I want to kill you or anything like
Nope.
that? Because I've heard of other autistic kids that do that. And I
I've
want to
heard
know
that
what's
too.
the root of that.
I
Yeah.
have never, he has never said anything like that to me, Cindy. His, he's got in his mind that certain words are mean and hateful.
Mhm.
And so he will use,
So if he's angry,
when he's
then
angry,
he
yes,
wants to
when
use
he's
those words.
angry,
Yeah.
he wants to use those words, and he will call people really mean and hurtful things.
Mhm.
He in high school learned about the Nazi symbol.
Oh,
And so, yeah, all he knew was that was bad, right? In
yeah.
his mind.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, he would draw that signal in books, on people's cards, when he would get angry, not even at them. Like,
Yeah.
and that was weird. That's the other thing that was interesting with Jordan is, so if he was mad at me,
Mhm.
he would go to the center and draw something mean on somebody's card.
Oh.
Or if he was mad at one person at the center, he would call somebody else something mean. So it was never like it never
So you're trying to
correlated.
figure out who he's mad at, I guess, when
Right,
he's doing that.
right, exactly. Like, and they'd call me and say, he did this or that. And I'd say, well, I'm sorry, that's because he was mad at me this morning. And so he came there and did that.
Right.
And we had a really bad behavior. He'd walk out of the house to get on the bus and he'd flip the bird held up in the air way high for everyone on the bus to see, the bus driver. And so that was one of the behaviors that we started working on. It was like, listen,
Mhm.
if you want to do that, you put your hand in your pocket so no one sees it. Well,
Right.
then we got to, he didn't hold his hand in the air anymore for everyone to see it. He would do it behind his back on the way out to the bus.
Okay.
and then we graduated to putting it in the pocket.
Okay. And he's doing that to you as he walks out? 'Cause he's
Oh
mad at
yeah,
you?
whenever he was mad. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. And so
And what was setting him off? What was making him mad? Like you didn't make him the right breakfast or something, or like what type of things?
it could be anything. It really depends on the day. Most of it would be maybe if I caught him eating something and he'd already had breakfast and he wasn't supposed to eat and I said something to him.
Right.
Or I told him, if he was going somewhere that day, to make sure he did or didn't do something, and Jordan just really got to the place where he was like, this is my stuff.
Right.
I'm and that was kind of the voice he would use, because I said so.
Mhm.
It's like a control thing for him. And I think, as he got older, he had less and less control.
That's it for part 1 of Shannon's interview. Be sure to join us next time for part 2, where she's going to tell us a really funny story about the day of his high school graduation and what she's doing now to help other families with children with autism. If you're interested in buying our book series, Robbie's World and His Spectrum of Adventures, the link will be in our episode description, as well as my Instagram and Facebook pages. If you enjoyed the show and you'd like more content, please be sure to hit that like button, follow us, and don't forget to leave us a great review. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to join us again on our next episode of Spectrum Perspectives.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of today's episode. Be sure to join us again next time to hear the second half of the interview on Spectrum Perspectives.